Welcome to your daily gaming update for Wednesday, May 31st, 2023. I am your host, Joe. The channel is taking a different approach for today's update by dividing it into two parts, Part 1 and Part 2. The reason for this is to provide additional details for a recent development regarding the ROG Ally handheld, with a version that included the Ryzen Z1 Extreme, releasing June 13th, at least in the United States, as some outside the United States have already received the handheld. For those interested in the recent ROG Ally development, please continue to listen onward before listening to Part 2 on additional updates different than the ROG Ally handheld. And of course, sources for this update are in the description. A wave of ROG Ally-based frame rate numbers using different TDP or thermal design power settings has surfaced. Specifically, individuals have speculated how well the handheld can perform at lower power settings, or rather, using a lower wattage for its power draw. Initially, performance on the ROG Ally for low power draw was seen by many as unimpressive, especially in competition with the Steam Deck and with the Ayanyo 2S handheld. Asus has released a new firmware that significantly boosts the ROG Ally for low power gaming, as indicated by a source dated May 30th. This source asserts that this new firmware makes the ROG Ally on the same level as the Ayanyo 2S, which is a new handheld as well, though it uses the Ryzen 7 7840U Phoenix APU, or Application Processing Unit, a standard version of the Ryzen Z1. The source consulted shows tests indicating that the Steam Deck has an advantage still at lower power draw. However, it is significant to note that there are clear differences between the Steam Deck's Zen 2 4-core CPU and the AMD Ryzen Z1 Extreme 8-core CPU. The configurable TDP for the APU power draw on the Steam Deck has a range of 4 to 15 watts, whereas the Ryzen Z1 Extreme has a 9 to 30 watt range. However, the ROG Ally will need to be plugged in to take advantage of the 30 watt power draw. The Steam Deck CPU can operate at a lower wattage or power draw than the ROG Ally CPU, which explains this majority opinion in combination with the AMD Ryzen Z1 Extreme having 8 cores compared to 4 on the Steam Deck. Additionally, the SoC, or system on chip, for the graphics processor on the ROG Ally is 12 compute units, or CUs, compared to 8 CUs on the Steam Deck. A processor, GPU, or CPU with less cores drawing power can impact gaming performance at a lower power draw. However, this is one factor of others like firmware that is a variable. The additional cores can achieve a higher gaming performance with a sufficient power draw, and the tests show that the ROG Ally achieves a higher average frame rate with 25 watts compared to a lower wattage. For Cyberpunk 2077 at 25 watts power draw, the ROG Ally with the firmware update at 720p resolution can achieve 43 average frames per second, or FPS, compared to 33 at 15 watts. The Steam Deck remains at 25 for both 15 watt and 25 watt. The Ayanyo 2S handheld has the same outcome, though with 2 frames higher than the ROG Ally at 25 watt, though ties the ROG Ally at 15 watt. Again, this is for Cyberpunk 2077. Moreover, those disinterested in high-fidelity gaming, including ray tracing, may decide to purchase the Steam Deck over the ROG Ally for up to $649 compared to $699 respectively. For 720p resolution on Cyberpunk 2077, for example, at 9 watts, the ROG Ally prior to the firmware update averaged 13 FPS, whereas after the update, the handheld averaged 17 FPS. The Ayanyo 2S ties the Ally at 17 FPS average as well, whereas the Steam Deck performed at 18 FPS average. The source does show the average FPS of games at 15 watt and 25 watt, and the ROG Ally averages a higher frame rate across games compared to the Steam Deck, including Cyberpunk 2077. The new firmware significantly, even with the higher wattage settings, does make a difference when comparing the average frame rates between before and after the firmware update. These numbers are according to a source reviewed for the channel across the different games detailed, such as Red Dead Redemption 2 and Miles Morales, all at 720p resolution. With a lower power draw at 9 watts, the Steam Deck outperformed the ROG Ally even with the new firmware update. To confirm, these tests are for the ROG Ally are within the Ryzen Z1 Extreme CPU specification. No tests are available from this source on the non-extreme Ryzen Z1 CPU. The tests do not specify whether FSR or Fidelity FX Super Resolution, to name it, is used as well. Well, that's it for part 1 of this daily gaming update. You can look forward to part 2 of the daily gaming update for Wednesday, May 31st, 2023. Never miss a daily gaming update by subscribing to the channel on YouTube or selecting the follow button on your podcast service of choice. Let me leave you now with the words of Commander Shepard from Mass Effect. I should go.